Okay, so this is Marty Wilson speaking. It's March 20th, or April 20th, 2023. We're sitting in my living room in Delaware Watergate because of the work that's going on at the mansion right now. We're here with Bob Widener, and Tanya's with us. And we're here to talk about Bob's career as a musician, although he's done many other things in the Poconos. So Bob, let's start with where and when you were born and how you got interested in music, and then how you ended up in the Poconos.
I was born in Allentown. We moved a lot of different places when I was a kid, but basically I spent my early years and teenage years in a little town called Stevensburg, New Jersey, which was basically farmland. So people ask me where I grew up. I say I grew up on a farm, even though I didn't really grow up on a farm, but there were farms around us. And so we lived there until I was 14 or 15, I think. And
What year were you born?
1939.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm 84 today. Not that today's my birthday.
Go ahead.
So at some point, my father took a job in the Poconos because he was, among many other things, he was a butcher. So we moved to Cresco, and behind a restaurant called Hickory Valley Farm Restaurant, which at that time there was one in Delaware Water Gap. There still is one in Swiftwater, although I think it's maybe changed the name. I'm not sure about that. And we lived in a tiny house behind this restaurant. And my father worked at the actual place where they did the smoking of the meats and everything. Eventually, he and my mom ended up running the restaurant, which was great because we could eat there, and I got a job as a dishwasher there at some point. And actually the little house that we lived in, I just noticed the other day has been torn down. But previous to that, I would drive by that little house and wonder, how did myself, my mother and father, and my two sisters live in this tiny little house?
How many bedrooms?
Actually, when we moved there, there was nothing. There was an attic. They had to redo the attic to split it into two large rooms. I had one for a bedroom, and my two sisters had the other one. Before that, I have no idea where we slept because there weren't that many rooms downstairs.
And you were 14, roughly, give or take, when you moved there?
15.
15?
I think it was 15
Okay,
then.
yeah.
And then, so music-wise, I kind of grew up with songs like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window and things like that. And then, of course, Rock Around the Clock came out, and that kind of changed my whole, like, wow. So I think it might have been the Christmas of my 15th year that I asked my mother for a guitar for Christmas. And she got me she got me a K guitar from Sears, where the strings were about that high off the fretboard.
Yeah.
So that built my calluses up really fast.
And you were into it from the beginning? Nobody had to urge you to practice or anything?
I hadn't what?
Did anybody have to force you to practice, or were you...
Oh, no, not at all. And at that time, I was pretty much into country music, so those were all the songs I was learning. Everything Hank Williams ever did, and anyway, what I would do is I would take my guitar over into the restaurant, which was a stone building, at night, and by the light of the neon sign in the window, I would go in there to practice at night. It had a nice kind of natural echo to it, so I'd be over there for hours practicing these songs.
And the place was closed, obviously.
It was closed, yeah.
And it's still the K guitar?
And what?
It's still the K guitar?
Yes. I think at some point then, I remember my mom and I going down to a music store in Allentown, Bethlehem maybe, and I bought myself a Gretsch Chet Atkins guitar, which was maybe $300 or $400 at the time. I'm not sure, but I had that guitar for quite a while. So of course it was much easier to play. It was electric. I got an amp and started still pretty much into country music, but then at the time, do you have any questions you want to ask?
I just wanted to
Boy,
ask
I'm
you.
rattling on and on.
No, that's great. But I wanted to ask before we get off of it, were you teaching yourself or did you take lessons?
Teaching myself, yeah.
So you'd sit down with a record and just figure out a song?
Well, at that time it wasn't, how did I do that? I think I would just hear the song on the radio or from a record player. I didn't actually have anything over there with me. Maybe sheet music or words or something like that. I mean, it's amazing today where you can just go on YouTube and find out not only the song you want, but the lyrics, the chords, you know.
Yeah, I know.
So
anyway, you were talking about this Gretsch. What about the amplifier? What kind of amp did you?
I don't remember what kind of amplifier I got with the Gretsch, because at some point I got a Fender Strat and then I bought a Fender amplifier. But backing up just a little bit, so I had a friend who played and wrote a lot of its own country music. He and I would play together. And I worked at a place called Pocono Sports Shop at the time. And I thought I was kind of hot stuff on the guitar. And one day this tall, lanky guy came in. He was from Texas. He was a social director at Mount Airy. And he said, "Hey, I hear you play guitar. Maybe we should get together sometime." I said, "Yeah, great." I think we got together at Mount Airy, and the first thing he played was the opening riff to That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly. And I just, oh my God. Because at that point, I'd just been playing chords, maybe some Johnny Cash, you know, back and forth on the lower bass strings. But when he did that, and that two-finger rock and roll thing, that led me on a whole different path. So I remember at one point playing at a party for our school class, doing practically every Buddy Holly song that he did. And I'll give you a chance to ask any questions if you have.
Well, no, you're doing great. Did you go to Barrett High School?
Went to Barrett High School, which has been torn down.
So you're working at the sports shop, 15, 16 years old? You're still in high school?
I think I was 16 then.
You're still, okay, so you're still in high school.
No, I was still 15 because I remember I had to hitchhike back and forth to get there, which was maybe 2 or 3 miles away.
Yeah.
And I would stop there. The bus would drop me off after school. And so I'd work after school. Loved that place. Learned so much in that.
So did this friend of yours, this social director, what was his name?
I don't remember.
Doesn't matter. Did that turn into anything, or was that just a
No,
one
we
time?
did do a couple jobs at Mary Hill Lodge.
So that was your first professional.
Yeah, I think we did one job there. And then I started doing singles at Pocono Gardens because I knew the social director there. He used to bring all the honeymooners into the sports shop on a given certain day of the week. And so that's how I got to know him and Bernie Whitman. And so I did singles there, I think every Thursday night for a couple of years.
Wow.
And then he went to Cove Haven in Lake Wallenpaupack. So I switched to there and did singles every Tuesday night at Cove Haven for 5 or 6 years. My picture was in their brochure, and that was great. It was a different audience every week, and yet it was the same every week because I started telling jokes and I could figure out what things they liked and what they didn't like. And
a resort gig, typical resort gig.
Right.
Yeah. So, but 5 or 6 years, you're out of high school at this point. Did you go to college?
No, I went to ESU for I think 1 or 2 semesters. But back to the still at Pocono Sports Shop. Ed Hill had put an ad in the paper looking for somebody to possibly start a band. And so I called him up, we got together, we hit it off. We started practicing in the basement of the sports shop. And from there, I think we started doing a couple of singles on some of the bars on 611. Then we got a combination sax player, bass player, and a drummer, and that's when the Devil's Band started, which is the whole point of this interview, correct?
Yeah, well, Bob Wyden was the point of the interview, but that was a big part of it.
So my wife at the time suggested, she was the one that came up with the name The Devils, which was kind of strange because she's a very religious person. And she had the idea of call yourself The Devils, I'll make you red capes. And so the first job we had was at some dance up in Lake Wallenpaupack, maybe a YMCA. And we came out on the stage wearing these red capes, and I felt so, it was pretty embarrassing actually. I couldn't believe that we were doing that. That was the only time that we ever wore the capes, but we kept the name The Devils.
Who are the other two guys? You didn't mention their names.
At the time it was Neil Leister on sax and bass, Ed Hill on rhythm guitar and vocals, myself on lead and vocal guitar, and gosh, I can't remember the name of the drummer. And if his wife watches this video, she's going to call me up again.
If it comes to you later on.
So we had him for maybe a summer. Anyway, the first major job he has as a band was at a little hole-in-the-wall place called Orchard Cottages, which was back in Henryville, owned by an African-American woman and her white husband. And tiny place, packed it every night. At some point in the middle of the summer, we had no fights or anything like that, but I just thought that it might be good to move to a different, bigger venue because we started filling the place up. So, I need a water break. I haven't talked this much in weeks.
Well, while you're drinking, how many nights a week were you working at this little tiny place? I mean, were you making enough money at that point that you could leave your other job or not?
No, I always had another job, even when the band was playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week. Always had a day job.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a place on Route 611 called the Charcoal Hearth, which was a restaurant. And I don't know what made me go there. I think I was checking out places for the size of the parking lots. Anyway, I went in there, convinced her to have us play there on a Friday or Saturday. I think it was a Friday night. We had to wait till all the people were finished eating. So she must have done some advertising. So we started playing there every Friday night. Then it got to be what happened was Route 80 was being constructed. And I think it was only as far as Delaware Water Gap. So people coming from the Jersey, that New York area had to come 611 all the way, which brought them past the Charcoal Hearth. So they had a lot of walk-ins, drive-in things. And at some point that summer when we were playing there, Route 80 opened up completely, so nobody was getting off on 611 and their restaurant business went down. That's when we started playing every Friday night, every Saturday night, every Wednesday night, and basically it was no restaurant and all music.
And what kind of crowds did you draw?
Well, it started out where they had to take out the charcoal fire pit, which was recessed into the wall. It went from one end of the building to the other. They took that out and they built a stage maybe about that high in that area so that we were facing out towards the bar area. And then from then I think we ended up building a higher stage in the corner so that we could see the dancers better, because that was the fun of playing. It was the people dancing, the energy. And so on any given night, the parking lot was full from one end of the other all the way up to what's now Pocono Pub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this has come up in a couple of other interviews about the Charcoal Hearth. without mentioning your name, or sometimes they did mention your name. But apparently it was quite the place. Were there other places you could go to see rock and roll? You're playing rock and roll at this point, right?
I think we were basically the first rock and roll band in Poconos. And maybe later on another place opened up in Henryville. He started booking bands. But there weren't that many places at that point in time.
And we're talking, just to put it in context, the year would be mid-60s?
Maybe 1964.
64?
63, 64.
Okay. So it's just at the beginning of rock and roll, too.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, the British invasion was just getting started. Yeah.
So we were doing Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, some Beatles songs started coming out. We were doing them. Never really did, it was all covers pretty much. Until at some point I came up with this song called The Devil Dance.
Yeah.
Which we recorded at a small recording studio in Scranton. And I walked out of there with the master metal disc. And one thing led to another. I took the disc to Capitol Records, which they had a plant in Scranton at the time. I ended up driving to New York and getting an ASCAP and BMI license so that we could print that on the label because I wanted it to look, I actually brought the record with me, the 45. I'll hold it up for the camera. This is the way music used to be done. And so the label says Devlet Labels, which I made up the name of the company, which really didn't exist, and the name of the song and the writer and the band and ASCAP and BMI. And borrowed some money, got 500 records pressed at Capitol Records, took them to the record store. I wanted to remember this name because it was a great little record store in lower downtown Stroudsburg, to, I think it was Joe Nardone's record store in Scranton, and Speedy's record shop in Allentown.
What was the one at Lower Main, next to the Sherman you're talking about?
Yeah, I can't think of the name.
It'll come to me. Go ahead.
So then, well, before I did that, I took the record to, you could actually walk into radio stations and met the disc jockeys and dropped the record off to maybe WARM in Scranton, WAEB in Allentown, and there was another radio station in Allentown, two down there, and WSB, it wasn't SBG then, I forget what it was called in Stroudsburg.
VPO?
WVPO, right. Okay, so radio stations started playing it. The record started selling in the record stores. I had three aunts that lived in Lehigh Valley at that time. My one aunt would call my dad up almost every day saying, "They played the Devil Dance. I heard it. I heard it again." She was calling him all the time. So there was a place in Allentown that printed a regular. I guess the record stores had like a chart, like where your song was on the chart. So at one point, I think let me back up. The records were selling. In fact, they sold out in a matter of a couple of weeks. Capitol Records went on strike. I couldn't get any more records pressed. People were asking for them at the record store. So based on that, they kept moving the song up on their charts, even though they weren't really selling the record. So I think at one point maybe we got to 15 and the Beatles were number 1 and number 2.
Wow.
So I still have one of those from that period.
Yeah. Must have been pretty exciting for you.
It was. Trying to think of the name of the disc jockey from the Lehigh Valley. He was Gene Kay. So he had this idea that, well, first of all, he brought us down to the Lehigh Valley one night. We did 3 different jobs in one night. We played one place, packed up all our stuff, went to another place. My dad was helping driving us around, and we ended up at a place called the YMCA Hub, which was a huge room, a high stage. The place was packed wall to wall. It was almost like I probably could have walked over the heads of the people. There were that many people, like a flooring. So it was the Devils opening up for the Angels, which was another big group at the time, and a perfect mix of names. So we came on
Did they
first.
come out with a white cape? Did they come out with a white cape?
Did they what?
Did they come out with a white cape? It's a joke.
We didn't stay. That would have been funny.
Yeah.
So we did maybe 3 or 4 songs, and then we got to do the Devil Dance. And the Devil Dance has a line in it saying, and we weren't thinking really too big at this time because it said, hey there, Scranton, what are you going to do? Hey there, Stroudsburg, what are you going to do? When it got to the part where it said, hey there, Allentown, what are you going to do? Hey, we're going to do a little dance for you. Oh, but they can't dance. And I would say in the song, oh, the heck they can't. But the audience erupted with the hell we can't. It was like an explosion went off,
Wow.
which just blew our minds. At one point, I dropped my guitar pick on the floor, and somebody picked it up and handed it to me like I was some kind of god. I touched his pick. So anyway, from there, Gene Kay had the idea to take us down to Cameo Parkway Records in Philadelphia, where Chubby Checker recorded and many other big names. And we recorded, I think, 3 different versions of the Devil Dance, putting in bigger cities' names, like Hey There, Detroit, and whatever the other ones were. And from there, he got us on to the Steel Pier, which was an every Sunday TV program on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And when it was our time to come out, we had no idea which of those versions they were going to play.
And you were lip syncing, so
We were lip syncing.
Yeah.
So my mother said it was the worst case of lip syncing she'd ever seen, because we just picked one like Hey There, Detroit, and did that version. And they probably had a different one.
so you couldn't really hear it. That
No.
not well enough to know.
No, not well enough.
Yeah. So you go on national television.
And then at some point, I think Chubby Checker wanted to record it, so we got kind of pushed to the side. He never did it, but that's as far as that ever went.
Did you ever make any money from that whole experience?
I don't think so.
Because every time you made some money selling records, you put it back into making more records.
Right. I think we were selling them for $1, and at some point, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, well, first of all, actually the record that I held up was the other song that we recorded called Now It's Gone, because I ran out of Devil records. I think my sister has a copy and a few close friends have one, but I didn't have my own. And of course, nobody has record players anymore to play them. So at some point I found a site on YouTube or somebody had told me that someone from the Lehigh Valley put out a digital version of garage bands from the Lehigh Valley, and he included the Devils, and he included the Devil Dance and the other song that I wrote and recorded called Now It's Gone. So I was able to download digital files of both of those songs that I have now.
So what about the other song? How'd that come about?
Wait,
Okay, all right, go ahead.
one more thing. I actually was able to find a copy of the Devil Dance that somebody was selling on eBay, which I bought for $1 maybe. I think I bought it for the same amount of money that we had been selling them for back then, and ended up getting another copy, which again I gave it to a friend of mine. So now to your question about the other song. We played at the Charcoal Hearth for, I think, 3 or 4 years, playing every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday night. We also played Sunday nights in Mountain Lake, New Jersey, and other places in the Poconos. So we pretty much were playing a lot of nights a week. And at some point, we met two women that came to hear us from New York. They lived in Greenwich Village. And they loved the band, and they had the idea of bringing us to New York, changing the name of the band to the Bentleys, driving us around New York in a Bentley car, which was kind of a crazy idea. And I was able to convince the other three guys to leave their jobs and go to New York, and they got us a job at a pretty popular place in Upper Manhattan called the Phone Booth. We were there for two weeks. So during that 2 weeks that we were there, I think maybe previous to that, I had written a song called Now It's Gone. And I think for the flip side, another song called Nighttime in the City. And they got us a booking at RCA Victor Records to record this song, which we did. And again, I think I took it to Capitol Records and got another 500 records pressed. But we never really had any place to sell them because we weren't working at the Hearth. But we did have this 45 record. So back to the two women, Jean and Jane, I think they were called. We slept on their floor in a tiny little apartment in Greenwich Village. The 4 band members, her and her partner, and her 2 children. I talked to the drummer because some things I forget, so I've talked to the drummer and the bass player who are still alive and asked them some things about things that I don't remember, because I said to them, where did we sleep? Where did we stay? And that's what he told me, that we slept on the floor. So another idea they had is they wanted us to do these dance routines on stage, which I was totally against. I didn't want to do that. And there were a couple other things that we started not to get along too well. And at one point I met a bar owner who just opened up a club on Long Island called Quoi La, which I think in French or in English means what the, I don't know why he had that name. But so we split up with those 2 women. We ended up playing the rest of the summer at his club 3 or 4 nights a week, and he put us up in a motel in Long Island. So that was a fun summer.
Wow.
At the time I was doing that, I was still driving back to Cove Haven every Tuesday night to do that job.
Holy cow.
So
then what happened at the end of the summer? I mean, you're on the cusp of sort of making it here, right? I mean,
we weren't really, because we split up with the 2 women who really had no other ideas of how to market us or I think I actually was never really into wanting to do that. In the back of my mind, I couldn't see myself touring, staying in motels and driving to different parts. It really didn't appeal to me. So it kind of all worked out for the best, because we ended up playing the summer at Long Island. We came back to the Poconos. I think we played maybe 3 or 4 other times at the Charcoal Hearth. And when we had gone, they had started booking other bands there. So I think we just kind of got sick of being together like some bands do, and we ended up breaking up. Well, the drummer said he really needed to go back to his full-time job, and so we broke up. I think I went on to have another couple bands that we ended up playing there, but it was kind of the end of that era, the Devil's era.
Yeah, the Devil's era. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. So, what did you do for a day job then after? You didn't go back up to Mountain Home, did you? After all of that?
No. I think at the time I was with the Devils, I was the display manager at Ray and Derek's in Stroudsburg.
Mm-hmm.
When we came back, I ended up working at the music store. At some point in the 60s, and I'm not sure when this happened, but I had a good friend who had an art studio in the city. His name is Don Gibbons. And I ended up working in Manhattan. I look back in this period, I go, how did I do this? Because I would leave early Monday morning and drive into the city. Their studio was an actual apartment, so there was a bedroom there. He had an ad agency. And I worked Monday and Tuesday. That's where I learned to do graphic design, paste up and things like that. And he taught me this stuff. So Monday and Tuesday I would work there. I would leave Tuesday night, drive all the way back to Cove Haven, stay over, play Wednesday night at the Hearth, leave Thursday morning, drive back to Manhattan, work Thursday, Friday, leave Friday at rush hour, drive back to the Poconos and play Friday, Saturday, Sunday night in Mountain Lake, New Jersey. But all the while loving being in the city. And again, this kind of ties into my Doors story. I ended up reading about the Doors in a New York paper, and they had the lyrics to what was it? Crystal Ship or Backdoor Man or something like that. Anyways, I've always really been into lyrics. And then I ended up getting the Doors reel-to-reel tape and just being blown away by all the songs. And we started doing all the Doors songs too, which I forgot to say, because we were doing Light My Fire, which we started doing Light My Fire before Light My Fire actually came out on the radio. So at one point, one of my daughters told me she'd be on the bus or something, and somebody would bring up the Doors song, and she would say, "No, that's my dad's song. He did that," because she heard us sing it.
Yeah.
And of course, I wanted to sound just like Jim Morrison, and we did sound pretty close to the record.
Yeah.
And so that's my Doors story.
So music's been a part of your life ever since. I mean, you've been in a lot of bands, including you did country with the Kramer Brothers for many years.
Right, with you.
Didn't you open for George Jones at one point with the Kramers?
We ended up opening up for, who did you say?
George Jones
No. Yeah, it was George Jones.
down at Lehigh,
Yeah.
and Boxcar Willie or somebody like that too.
It wasn't him, but it was some other famous group. Actually, that was one of the sickest times I have ever been in my life. That I had to drive from the Poconos. I don't know how I did it. Came out on stage, and with the energy of everything else, I just totally forgot about being sick. I was cracking jokes and everything else, and we really put on a good show that night in Stabler Arena.
Yeah. And then you start working at Printing Craftsman, so that's an extension of what you were learning in New York City.
Right.
And then you got into photography.
Well, I worked at Printing Craftsman as the graphic design art director job for, I think, 10 or 15 years maybe. And the business kind of started going downhill, and I was looking to retire, so I did. I retired for about a year and ran into a friend of mine who was the photographer at ESU. He told me that I was leaving. He said, well, to back up, one thing that always bothered me about designing brochures was I would end up a lot of times getting photos that weren't of really good quality, and digital cameras came out at the time, so I ended up getting the digital camera and taking my own photos for some of the brochures I was doing. So I was learning a lot about digital photography, and kind of had always been interested in photography, maybe years ago. So when I retired and ran into my friend, and he put in a good word for me at ESU. So basically when I walked in there, they pretty much had decided that I would be their photographer, and it was kind of a learning experience because it was a whole different thing to take your camera out into a resort and set your camera up on a tripod, to going to live events, having to figure out when and where to use flash and how to set your ISO for dark rooms and it was a learning experience. So yeah, I've been there for, I think this is my 11th year now.
You're still there.
I'm still there and pretty much basically handle all the photography, including booking jobs for the 3 other photographers that we have, which are great photographers. Photo retouching, filing the photos, and work from home, but I have access to the ESU hard drive, so I can do photo retouching when they need it, and it's kind of a full-time job for me.
When are you going to retire, Bob?
I love doing it, so
Yeah,
I can't see myself stopping.
yeah. Well, you've had a pretty interesting life.
I have.
Were there some other things? Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Yeah. Well, maybe on that note we'll end. But thanks very much.
You're welcome. It's been great. Thank you.
Do the devil dance, devil dance. Do the devil dance, devil dance. If you want romance, devil dance. Do the devil dance, devil dance. If you don't know how to do it, we'll show you how to do the devil dance, devil dance. Hey there, Scranton, what you gonna do?
Hey, they gonna do a little dance for you.
Yeah, but they can't dance.
Ah, the heck they can't. Watch 'em go, Daddy. Do the devil dance.
Devil dance,
Do the devil dance.
devil dance,
Woo! Shake your feet, honey.
devil dance,
Ah, get with the beat.
devil dance,
If you don't know how to do it, we'll show you how to do the devil dance.
devil dance.
And hey there, Stroudsburg, what are you going to do?
Hey, those Stroudsburg chicks are gonna do a dance for you.
Yeah, but they can't dance.
Ah, the heck they can't. Watch 'em go, Daddy.
Uh-oh.
Do the devil dance.
Devil dance,
Do the devil dance.
devil dance,
Ah, shake anything you want to, baby. Do the devil dance.
devil dance.
If you don't know how to do it, we'll show you how to do the devil dance. Here we go.
Go, man. Yeah.
Hey there, Allentown, what you gonna do?
Hey, they gonna do a little dance for you.
Yeah, but they can't dance.
Ah, the heck they can't. Watch 'em go, Daddy. Do the devil dance.
Devil dance,
Do the devil dance.
devil dance,
Woo! Shake your feet, honey.
devil dance,
Ah, get with the beat.
devil dance.
If you don't know how to do it, we'll show you how to do the devil dance.
Devil dance.
Come on, come on.
So good. Yeah. Oh, baby.
You're so fine.
When I beside him, holding hands and playing cool. I cannot decide which one of us has been the bigger fool. Oh no, oh no. Could it be the fact that we're apart that makes us feel this way?